The wind from the steppes howled outside as it had for 3 days, confining the archaeological team to their huts. It was late May, a time of year when temperatures were soaring and dust storms frequent as the winds picked up dirt and sand from the desert. Still, only stray bits of grit blew in on those occasions when Claire had ventured out to the mess during the storm. The hot air in Claire's hut was dry enough to mummify the plum she had left sitting in a bowl. She had pretty much stripped down as she sat at her plywood desk. She thought back on the whirlwind of events that in a few short weeks had brought her from a well-established life doing research in Florida to the searing heat of the Kazakh Steppes. It had all begun with a site visit from her funders, a visit that had gone well. Too well, as it turned out. She thought back to the day. One of the sweetest moments was the shower demonstration. Claire smiled as she thought of baby Teddy. "No, no, sweetie, you're doing it all wrong." Claire had walked over and pushed the lever. "See?" she said, looking into the soft brown eyes of the toddler. "You push the lever, and the water comes out." Claire had extended her arm to push a long handle so that she didn't get doused by the shower. The baby cocked his head and looked at Claire expectantly, but didn't reach for the lever. Claire sighed and turned behind her. "Come here, Mona. Why don't you try?" At the mention of her name, Mona, who had been standing placidly by, perked up and began lumbering forward. Claire turned back to the baby. "Okay, Teddy. Mommy's going to show you how." Then she nimbly and quickly stepped back to make way for the massive elephant. Mona walked under the 12-foot-high showerhead in the enclosure and pushed the lever with her trunk. She gave a soft rumble of pleasure as the cool water offered relief from the hot Floridian sun. Then she stepped back and, with her trunk, gently nudged baby Teddy forward. Teddy looked at Mona, glanced over at Claire, and then turned to the lever. Mona emitted another soft sound and put her trunk on the lever. Teddy tentatively extended his trunk and put it on the lever, too. Then Mona pushed the lever, and water gushed down on the 500-pound baby. Teddy jumped and gave an alarm call. Claire laughed. She turned to 2 men and a woman standing behind protective mesh and said, "I know I shouldn't say this, but I'd guess Mona was laughing, too." That produced chuckles in the group, who were sweltering in business attire and mopping their brows with handkerchiefs. Claire took pity. "Okay, let's get out of the sun and we can talk about the real work going on here." Later, as she waved goodbye, Claire had skeptically replayed the site visit. Not knowing what it was really about, she thought it had gone well. On surprisingly short notice, the Delamain Foundation, which funded her work, had sent a group of 2 trustees and the executive director to visit. Claire knew where her bread was buttered, and she'd made sure to mix the hard science, experiments to determine what information elephants conveyed through ultrasonic communication and how they perceived it, with the fun stuff. They'd loved the fun stuff. Apart from the shower demonstration, Claire had set up a pitching contest between one of the elephants, Flo, and one of the volunteers at the park who had previously played baseball in high school. Delamain was headquartered in Chicago, and so Claire had put a Chicago Cubs blanket on Flo's back. The first 2 times she tried to put the blanket on, Flo shook it off. When Flo finally seemed to accept that Claire was determined to keep the blanket on her back, Claire patted Flo behind her huge ears before climbing down, saying, "You could have told me earlier that you're really a Mets fan." Separated by a wire mesh, the elephant and a somewhat nervous volunteer had taken turns trying to throw softballs through a tire about 40 feet away. Flo was rewarded with a treat for every successful throw, as well as lusty cheers from the Delamain delegation. While the delegation was delighted and dumbfounded when Flo won, Claire was not surprised. She knew that Flo's favorite game was throwing things. Indeed, the reason Flo had ended up at the park, which had been set up to serve as a refuge for superannuated elephants, was that one of her games in her former life at an Ohio zoo had been to throw rocks at the monorail that brought tourists through the elephant enclosure. Her accuracy had properly unnerved the administrators. Once Flo had arrived, Claire had set up the tire as a way of redirecting Flo's interest in throwing things in less destructive ways. Following the Delamain group's departure, Claire stopped by the trailer where the post